Okay, I think we can all agree. With the economy doing whatever that is, and the political scene being, well, the political scene, it's pretty easy to feel like, I don't know, maybe a little overwhelmed these days. Like, it feels like just everything's kind of spinning faster than ever before. How are we even supposed to find hope when the world just feels shaky?
Welcome to the Clarence Stowers Leadership Podcast, a podcast about becoming 1% better every day. And now your host, yours truly, Clarence Stowers. Welcome to the Clarence Stowers Leadership Podcast dedicated to exploring how we can find stability and hope in a world that feels like it's constantly shifting. It's all about getting 1% better every day. If you're anything like me, you probably noticed the uncertainty seems to be the only thing that we can count on these days. Political divisions are deeper than ever. The economy feels like a roller coaster, and social and moral debates can cause tension even in our closest relationships. It's easy to feel overwhelmed when the world seems unstable. Come to the front of the class. It is easy to feel overwhelmed when the world seems unstable. And that's the challenge of uncertainty. Think about this for a moment. Maybe you found yourself putting your hope in things that ultimately disappoint, like a political leader who fails to deliver, an economy that crashes, or people who let you down. It can leave you feeling shaken, unsteady, and stuck. But what if there was a different way to approach life's challenges? What if you could find an anchor that cannot be moved? That's right, I'm encouraging you to find a deeper hope. So, in today's episode, we'll be exploring the idea that true hope isn't found in the headlines, it's found in something much deeper. We'll explore the concept of finding an unshakable foundation, something that remains constant even when the world around us is in chaos. This isn't about ignoring the problems of the world, but about finding a different perspective, a different source of strength, a different anchor. So, we'll see how some people seem to have the ability to trust in something more solid, like Daniel, one of my favorite biblical characters, who lived in a world where the government was corrupt and his people were in exile. And yet Daniel didn't trip because he knew something about God that we tend to forget when things get hard. So, we'll draw inspiration from the concept of God's sovereignty, which is the idea that God is in control. We'll look at passages like Romans 15:13, which speaks about being filled with joy and peace through our trust in God. We'll unpack the idea that peace is a gift that the world cannot give us. We'll also explore how we live with confidence and not be moved by the storms of life. Again, I want to help you. This podcast isn't just about theory, it's about practical application. We'll explore application steps such as praying more than we panic and engaging with wisdom rather than fear. We'll look at ways to fix our focus, not on the shifting sands of the world, but on something that is eternal. I want you to get the most out of today's episode. So therefore, I'm encouraging you to first reflect on your own anchors. What are the things you're currently putting your hope in? Are they temporary? Or are they something that can't be moved? Secondly, Engage with an open mind. Consider that there might be a different source of hope and stability than you previously considered. Additionally, apply the steps. Try putting the principles into practice. As you listen, pay attention to how you might be able to take the ideas from this podcast and apply them to your life. Furthermore, share your journey. We encourage you to share your thoughts and experiences with us on our social media channels listed in today's show notes. My goal is that we can learn from each other and grow together. And then finally, remind yourself that every time you feel anxious, pause, pray, and remind yourself of God's sovereignty. God is in control. So this week, when fear arises, fight back with faith. I'm going to say that one last time. When fear arises, fight back with faith. Don't let the world's uncertainty steal the certainty of a better way to live. Remember, hope is not found in the headlines. It's found in something more solid, something you can depend on. Now, I'm glad you're here. So find a comfortable space. Find something to write with, something to write on. Grab your favorite beverage. Get comfortable. And let's begin this journey together. I'll see you on the inside.
Okay, I think we can all agree with the economy doing whatever that is and the political scene being, well, the political scene, it's pretty easy to feel like, I don't know, maybe a little overwhelmed these days. Like it feels like just everything's kind of spinning faster than ever before. And finding any solid ground, just finding a place to stand, that's tough. So how are we even supposed to find hope, when the world just feels so shaky? That's kind of the big question we're diving into today.
Yeah, it's interesting, that feeling of turbulence. You're totally right. It's kind of an echo. You hear it throughout history, right? People have always kind of had to grapple with uncertainty. But it's the choices we make in those moments, right? When things feel shaky, that's what really defines us,
Yeah.
And to guide our deep dive today, we've got two really interesting sources. One that's looking at, it's exploring the spiritual side of hope, hope in the middle of all this chaos. And the other one's coming at it from a very, very different angle. It's much more politically charged. It's kind of a take on current events.
Yeah, and they might seem like they're coming from like completely different worlds, but I think if we stick with it, if we unpack these ideas kind of side by side, I think we might find some surprising connections and maybe even a fresh perspective on, where to find hope in all this craziness.
Totally. And the first source we're looking at, it really jumps right in, It says, look, true hope, you're not going to find that in things that come and go, like politicians or, like a booming economy. It's got to be something deeper.
So it's kind of like the story of Daniel, right? Exiled, surrounded by like corrupt leaders, living in a culture that just totally rejects everything he believes in. And yet through it all, he just holds on to this like unwavering hope.
I love that story. It's so powerful. Daniel's story, it's like he's a reflection of, of us today in a lot of ways. His struggles, they remind us that no matter what's happening, no matter what crazy stuff is going on in the world, there's a deeper truth, right? That remains constant. Just like Daniel held on to his faith, in the middle of this corrupt empire, we can find that same strength in our own beliefs, even when the news is just screaming chaos.
So is that where this whole anchoring your hope thing comes in? It's like finding that solid thing to hold on to, the thing that's not going to crumble when the storm hits?
Exactly. Yeah, it's like this source uses this really powerful image of an anchor. Imagine if your anchor is hooked onto something that's, temporary, like a politician's promises or a booming stock market. You're going to get tossed around by every wave, right? But if your anchor is rooted in something, unshakable, if it's grounded in something that's bigger than yourself, well, then the storm can rage, but you're not going to drown, and that's where faith comes in.
Okay, so if we're trying to find this lasting hope, we got to be really careful about where we place our trust, right? Like we really got to be discerning about what we're clinging to for security. And this kind of brings us to our second source, which takes a very different view, right?
Totally different, yeah.
I mean, it's way more political, isn't it?
It's, yeah, it really is. This source, it's like, it's not afraid to name names. They specifically call out people, figures like Trump and Musk, saying they're contributing to this dangerous erosion of democracy. And there's just this real sense of urgency in the analysis, and even fear, like a real fear. And that fear, that anxiety about where things are headed, I mean, it's something a lot of people are feeling right now, for sure.
It's definitely a contrast to the peace and trust we see in the first source. I mean, it kind of makes you wonder if the two can even coexist, right? Like, can you have this deep spiritual hope while also feeling, deeply concerned about what's going on in the world politically?
So that's a great question. It's a really powerful question. And, at first glance, these sources might seem like they're totally at odds, like they're on opposite sides of everything. But there is actually some common ground there. Both of them, in their own way, they're highlighting this human tendency to misplace our hope, right? We cling to political systems, we chase economic security, we put our faith in, flawed leaders. It's like we're always searching for something to hold on to in a world that just feels, anything but solid. But the question is, are those things truly reliable?
It's like we're trying to build a foundation on shifting sand, No wonder we feel so unsettled. So how do we find that solid ground, that real foundation?
I think that's where the first source's message about anchoring our hope in something transcendent, that's where it becomes really relevant. It's about recognizing that, true security doesn't come from external things. It comes from cultivating this deep internal sense of peace that comes from connecting with something bigger than ourselves.
So it's not just about, believing in a higher power in some vague way, right? It's about actively nurturing that relationship, making it like a living, breathing part of our lives.
Exactly. It's about turning to that anchor when the storms hit, instead of letting ourselves be, tossed around by all the waves of uncertainty and fear. And it's interesting because that kind of brings us back to the second source, right? And it's focused on the political landscape. It's this powerful reminder that even when we're, deeply passionate about something, a cause or whatever, or when we really believe in a leader's vision, we got to be careful. We can't make those things, those people, the sole source of our hope.
Because people are fallible, right?
Yeah.
Systems, they break down, and even the best leaders, even the best ones, they make mistakes.
Totally. And if our entire sense of well-being, if it's wrapped up in those things, well, we're just setting ourselves up for a world of hurt, disappointment, disillusionment, even despair, all that can creep in when our hope is misplaced.
Yeah.
That's not to say we shouldn't be engaged citizens, right, or advocate for the things we believe in, but it's a powerful reminder to keep our anchor planted firmly in something, something deeper.
Yeah.
Something that transcends the whole political arena, something that gives us that unshakable core of peace,
Yeah. So much of what you're saying just clicks, especially that idea that misplaced hope, it can really set us up for disappointment, It's like setting ourselves up to get let down. But where do we even begin to shift that focus? How do we actually start anchoring our hope in something more stable, something that's not going to, let us down?
Well, the first source, it actually gives us some really practical advice here. It encourages us to pray more than we panic. And I think that's such a powerful reminder. Instead of getting, swept up in all the fear and anxiety, we can actually choose to turn towards a source of peace, as a source of strength. And for a lot of people, that's a relationship with God.
But it's not just about like believing in a higher power in some vague way, right? It's about actually nurturing that relationship, making it like a real living, breathing part of our lives.
Exactly. Yeah, it's about choosing to connect, to seek guidance, to find comfort in that connection, And that's where I think practices like prayer and studying scripture, that's where those come in. It's about actively seeking that anchor when the storms of life hit, right? Rather than just letting ourselves be tossed around by all the waves of uncertainty and fear.
It's almost like training our minds to look for the hope, to focus on that anchor, even when things feel like totally chaotic, which, let's be honest, can be really hard sometimes.
Oh, yeah. It definitely is. It definitely is. And I think that's where the second source, even though it's focused on all the negative aspects of the political landscape, I think it actually offers some valuable insights there too. Think about those specific examples, right? The things that the author calls an erosion of democracy. Things like, attempts to overturn election results or policies that restrict voting rights. I mean, these are serious concerns, and it's important to be aware of them for sure. But the source also, it kind of unintentionally highlights how easily our hope can get tangled up in the political realm.
So even if we're super passionate about a certain cause, or we really believe in a leader's vision, we've got to be careful about making those things, the only source of our hope.
Exactly, because what happens if they let us down? What happens if that cause, faces setbacks or things don't go the way we hoped? If our hope is solely rooted in those things, then we're setting ourselves up for this roller coaster of emotions. We're going to be swinging from elation to despair with every political win or loss.
That's exhausting. Yeah, it sounds like finding that deeper source of hope, that more stable source. That's crucial, no matter what our political beliefs are.
Absolutely, it's not about being naive or ignoring what's happening in the world. It's about recognizing where our true security lies. It's about finding that inner peace that transcends all the ups and downs of the political arena. And I think that's where the image of Daniel that comes back to mind. Here's a guy, he was deeply involved in the political landscape of his time. Right, he was serving in high-ranking positions, in a foreign government. But he never let that political role define him, or become his only source of hope.
He found a way to stay grounded in his faith, even when it meant, facing persecution or going against the people in power. He was able to navigate this really complex and often, corrupt world and still stay true to his beliefs.
And that's a pretty inspiring model for us, don't you think? It shows us that we can be deeply concerned about the state of the world and at the same time be deeply rooted in a source of hope that transcends all the turmoil. It's not an either situation. We can be informed, engaged citizens while also nurturing that inner peace, that unshakable core of hope.
So practically speaking, how do we actually do that? How do we cultivate that kind of hope, especially when the world just feels so full of uncertainty?
Well, the first source, it actually gives us another piece of really practical advice. It says to engage with wisdom instead of fear and be a light in dark times.
I love that. Yeah. It's about making a conscious choice to shift our focus, right? Instead of just dwelling on all the things that are wrong. We can choose to look for the good, to find ways to make a positive impact, even if it's just, in small ways.
Exactly. And it's not about, denying the challenges or pretending everything is perfect. It's about recognizing that we have a choice. We have a choice in how we respond to those challenges. We can choose to get swept up in all the negativity, or we can choose to be a source of hope, a source of light.
It's like that saying, what water grows, right? If we're constantly feeding our fear and anxiety, well, that's what's going to flourish in our lives. But if we make that conscious effort to nourish hope, to focus on the things that bring us, peace and joy, well, that's what's going to take root and grow.
And what's really interesting is there's a growing body of scientific research that shows the profound impact that hope has on our physical and mental health.
Yeah.
It's not just about, feeling better emotionally. It's about tangible benefits.
Really? So hope is actually good for us physically.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, studies have shown that people who have a strong sense of hope, they tend to have lower blood pressure, better cardiovascular health, and even stronger immune systems.
Yeah.
They're also more resilient, when they face stress and adversity.
Wow. So choosing hope, it's not just about, feeling better. It's about living better physically and emotionally.
Exactly. And that's why it's so crucial to remember that hope is a choice. We can choose to focus on all the things that make us feel, afraid and overwhelmed, or we can choose to cultivate hope even when things are tough.
So it's about intentionally shifting our perspective, finding those anchors that ground us, and reminding ourselves that even in the middle of all the darkness, there's always light to be found. It's a powerful message, and it feels especially relevant right now. It feels like, we've been talking a lot about finding hope on this individual level, for ourselves. But I'm wondering, can choosing hope, can that actually have a kind of a ripple effect? Can it actually make a difference in the world around us?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Think about it. If we're constantly walking around just filled with anxiety and fear, it's going to impact how we interact with everyone, right?
Yeah.
It affects our ability to be present,
Yeah.
in our communities. And it limits our capacity for kindness and compassion,
So it's not just about, our own personal well-being then. It's about like creating a more hopeful world, a more compassionate world.
Exactly. Yeah. When we radiate hope,
Yeah.
when we approach challenges with optimism and a belief that positive change is possible, it can be contagious, and inspires other people to do the same.
It's like we become these like beacons of light, illuminating the path forward for the people around us.
Totally. Yeah. And that kind of brings us back to the core message of that first source we talked about, right? Being a light in dark times, it's not about ignoring the darkness, or pretending that everything's perfect. It's about choosing to focus on the light, on the good that still exists in the world, and letting that light guide our actions.
So as we kind of wrap up this deep dive into hope, hope in turbulent times, what's the one thing you'd want our listeners to take away from all of this?
That's a good question. I think the biggest takeaway for me is recognizing the things that we tend to place our hope in. That's often the first step towards finding a more stable, more lasting source of peace. It's about becoming aware of those unconscious anchors that we've attached ourselves to, right? And then gently, intentionally shifting our focus to something stronger, something that won't let us down.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And I think to build on that, I want to leave our listeners with a challenge for this week. Pay attention to your own anxieties, What are those little things, those little triggers that set off your worry alarm? What are the things that reveal where you've unconsciously placed your hope?
Yeah, and once you've identified those triggers, think about how shifting your focus, even in small ways, how that might lead to a greater sense of peace. Maybe it's taking a few minutes each day to pray or meditate. Maybe it's consciously seeking out positive news stories or engaging in activities that bring you joy.
Maybe it's just reminding yourself that even in the middle of all the uncertainty, there's still so much to be grateful for. The important thing is to remember that hope is a choice. And it's a choice that has the power to transform, not just our own lives, but the world around us. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep seeking, keep exploring, and keep choosing hope.
You've been listening to the Clarence Stowers Leadership Podcast. Join us next time for more insights on becoming 1% better each day and leveling up in all areas of life.